Hello, writers, and welcome to the Author Burnout Coach, the show where we put the publishing industry and all sorts of societal messaging under a microscope. I'm your host, Isabel Sterling, YA author and certified life coach. In each episode, I offer you specific steps that you can take to break up with burnout and reclaim your love of stories. I'm on a mission to dismantle the bookish hustle culture, one writer at a time. I hope you'll join me. Hey writer friends, welcome to episode 16, and this is going to be a good one. And I know I say that every week, but I truly am so excited for this topic. It's something that comes up for writers at every stage of their career, from the brand new newbies all the way to folks who have 10, 20, 30 books out. It's also a decision that can be really fraught for a lot of us. As writers, and really even just as humans, we love it when there is a right answer. Unfortunately, when it comes to picking your next novel or a screenplay or whatever it is you write, there truly is no right answer. No one can predict the whims of reader interest or publisher trends. Even the publishers themselves can't predict with perfect accuracy which books are going to hit big and which ones won't. You know, some books they'll bet big on and pay a ton of money for and shell out lots and lots of money for fancy marketing. And then the book doesn't really do a whole lot sales-wise, or at least, doesn't hit the bestseller list or some of those big milestones that they're hoping for. And then at the same time, there are books that publishers mostly ignore, but they sort of hit just right with their readership and then go on to be huge successes and launch very successful careers. That's not to say, of course, that publisher support of a book doesn't matter. I'm just saying this to illustrate that there's no guarantees in this business. Even the really big names like your Stephen King or your Nora Roberts, their books don't sell the same number of copies book to book to book. They may always sell really well, but it's not like it's this perfect upward trajectory forever. It's not like every book sells X number of copies. And that's not a problem. And it also means that there's no perfect answer to the question of what should I write next. Now, sometimes publishing does decide for us. We have contracts to fulfill, and our publishers have a say in what will indeed satisfy that contract. But outside of that, when all of the contracts are completed and we only have ourselves and our creativity to answer to, then, what the fuck do we do? Great question. Do we write another YA novel, or do we shift over to the adult space, or vice versa? Do we try idea 1 or idea 2? Do we stick with our familiar fantasy genre, or do we shift to space opera that's really been calling to us? Ooh, or maybe that horror idea, or maybe I'll finally try picture books. There's so many options. And of course, if you are published and or have an agent, your agent is likely going to have some thoughts on what makes sense given the context of the rest of your career, but they may only be able to help you narrow down to 2 or 3 choices that they think would work. Or they may say, you could really go either way if you want to say in this genre or that genre, and then within those, these couple ideas you've shared, I think would fit the market now. Once they've helped you narrow it down so far, then it's all up to you. And a lot of the advice about what to pick next for your next project hinges on determining which idea you're most excited about. And when there's a clear difference, that's a great way to go. I am all for following the idea that's calling to your heart. I am all for going all in on where your excitement is. But sometimes you can really talk yourself in either direction, or they all feel equally exciting. Or maybe you sort of just keep waffling back and forth between them. And when that's sort of your circumstance, that's what's going on, when your agent has given you the green light for both of the ideas and you genuinely can't decide which one to focus on, I have 2 questions that you can ask yourself to help determine your path forward. So question 1, if you were guaranteed to succeed, no matter which idea you picked, which would you choose? And then 2, if you were guaranteed to fail, no matter which idea you picked, which one would you be the most glad that you wrote anyway? So I'm going to let you have those questions sink in for a second. If you're going to succeed either way, which book do you want to succeed with? And if you're going to fail either way, and failure could be not selling or whatever, which book would be really worth the effort of doing regardless of its not great outcome? Now, I love the duality of these questions because as people, we tend to go to one extreme or another. We either picture our future and only see the good part, or we only see the obstacles. If you remember from last week's episode, life is 50-50. So no matter what you choose, no matter which project you do next, you will have struggles and obstacles, and you will have joys and fun. So for me personally, I tend to fall to the side of eternal optimism, or as one of my coaches, Cara Lowenthal, calls it, I tend to indulge in what she calls perfectionist fantasies. If this is you, this might sound familiar, where you think of a new book idea and you get so excited about the characters and the magic system, or whatever makes sense for your genre, the family dynamics, whatever it is. And then I imagine this unrealistic future that seems somehow like totally possible, which even though it never happens, where the book is super easy to write and everything comes together perfectly and it's like this instant bestseller and it's like this huge advance and it's just like amazing. And when we compare that idea of like, oh, it's gonna be so easy and so fun and it's gonna be so successful and I'm gonna get up every morning and write and it's gonna be great. When we compare that to the reality, that is, first drafts are messy and stories come together, at least for me, across multiple iterations. And I do a lot of heavy lifting and revision. The sort of magical idea of this really easy book, that's never how it goes. But because I spend so much mental energy imagining how easy and fun it'll be, those little speed bumps can start to feel like overly dramatic and overly catastrophic. And I get overly worried about them because I was so focused just on the good stuff. On the other side of the spectrum are the folks who are drawn to really imagining the challenges. So they might get a book idea and then their mind goes to all the research they're going to have to do and how tricky the plot's going to be to figure out and how the market isn't quite right for this project. And when they go in that direction, they might not even get started because they don't have any kind of good grasp on the positive 50% of the experience. Now, neither of these tendencies is better or worse than the other, as each one is missing an entire half of the equation. So this is why it's important to ask both of the questions I posed. If I'll succeed either way, what do I want? And if I'll fail either way, what do I want? Now, of course, success and failure aren't objective measurements. There's a saying that I really love that I heard from one of my coaches one time during a coaching session where they said that you're either winning or learning. And I really love that. And I think it's a super helpful way of looking at especially creative processes like writing a book. So if success and failure doesn't resonate for you, you can try asking the questions in a different way, which can also be a really, I think, helpful way to look at it. So the new version of this would be, if you're going to equally enjoy writing both projects, which one would you rather write? And if you're going to feel equally shitty and stressed out writing both projects, which one would you rather write? And these questions aren't meant to be a downer. It's just how reality works. Sometimes we feel amazing and sometimes we feel like ass. It is just how it works. So it's helpful to remind yourself of that reality because we so often trick ourselves into believing that a certain decision is going to take away the ass half of life. Which is just funny to say, the ass half of life. But it doesn't. No matter what we pick, we're always going to have those negative experiences. And that's okay. There is no, I think it's also Cara Lowenthal who says, there's no off-ramp to the human experience. No matter what we pick, no matter what we do, whether we go after our dreams or hide and never try to go after them, we're still going to have times that are great and times that aren't. It's just how it works. And you can actually use these questions for any big life decision. So let's say you're currently working a full-time day job while doing the author thing, nights, weekends, early mornings, and whenever you have a vacation from your day job, aka if you were me like a few months ago. You might be tempted to think that quitting your job to write full-time is going to take away all the stressful parts of your life. But nope. The parts that are hard will be different, but life never turns into this perfect ongoing bliss. It just doesn't. You will always have things to stress about or just bad shit that happens. I was supposed to record this podcast like 5 or 6 days ago, but my spouse randomly had a seizure and crashed their car. Like, that is the negative shit of life. And while having left my job to write full time has been such a blessing in that I have complete control over my schedule. I could drop everything and go to the hospital and deal with that and spend a few days there without having to like check in with a boss. That doesn't mean like that was still a really scary experience. Being a full-time writer doesn't change the scariness. It helped me with some logistics. And it's helping me, be able to be really flexible because we're going to be going to a lot of doctor's appointments over the next few weeks and probably months. And my spouse can't drive for the next 6 months. So I'm going to be having to shift some things around there too. There's nothing that's going to make that not be scary or be stressful at sometimes. That's just part of life. Like I had a really beautiful, wonderful day the day leading up to the crash. I got a lot of some good writing in and I had a good day with doing some stuff for my business. And then I got a really scary phone call. That is part of life being 50-50. There's nothing you can do to get rid of the sort of negative 50 half, but we can learn to manage it a lot better. Like I would have been a much more of a wreck than I was this past week without the tools that I've learned through coaching. Slight tangent aside, but we'll get back on track here. Okay, so if life is going to be half great and half terrible, no matter what, that's why it's so helpful to ask yourself those two questions. If I can be happy, for example, with a day job and happy writing full time, which would I rather do? And if I'm going to be stressed with a day job and stressed writing full time, which would I rather do? For me, the stress that comes from creating the life I want is easier to manage and is easier to be okay with than the stress that comes from living the life I thought was my only choice. And the moments of joy are much sweeter too. The balance is still 50-50. There are beautiful, amazing things about having left my day job that kind of like even helping right now with what's going on with my spouse and this accident that happened and like the fractured spine, all of the things. Life happens. And I would much rather have the sort of stress of like, okay, I got to make sure, these payments come in. So we've got a little cushion since they can't work right now and like all of that stuff. I'd much rather have that stress than the stress of like, do I have enough PTO to do all the things? And like, I'm very proud of myself for the choice I made, but also I know it doesn't make life perfect. It really doesn't. All right, this was supposed to be a very short and sweet episode. I sort of prepped this episode Monday before the accident that happened on Tuesday, so maybe a little bit more rambly than you're used to, so sorry about that. Actually, not sorry. It's all just, it is what it is, right? Is what it is. So to finally wrap up this episode, I want you just to think about the story ideas that you're trying to choose between and or ideas about what's possible for your life. And run them through these two questions. If I can be happy/successful either way, what is it I really want? And if I'll be stressed or if it's going to fail no matter what I pick, would I still be glad that I did? Even if you don't ultimately choose what your heart's deepest desire is, it's still incredibly powerful to know what that desire is. So often we tell ourselves, I don't know what I want. But what really is going on is we don't think we can try or have what we want. So at least telling yourself the truth that you do know and you're choosing to get it or not, or go after it or not, that is an incredible bit of power. That is it for this week. I am very hopeful to keep this regular schedule going, even with all of the upheaval from this accident. Next week, I have planned to talk about a really interesting topic, which is if we're going to get rid of burnout in publishing, whose responsibility is it? The writer or the publishers? Think on that, and I'll tell you my thoughts on it next week. So until then, happy writing. If you enjoyed this podcast, then you've got to get on my email list. You'll get my best advice sent right to your inbox with concrete steps on how to stay in love with writing and banish burnout for good. Go to isabelsterling.com/join to sign up. When you do, you'll get one of my favorite worksheets, the 5 causes of writer's block. I teach you how to diagnose why you're stuck and how to get writing again. That's isabelsterling.com/join. See you next week.